The Dharma, incomparably profound and exquisite, is rarely met with even in hundreds of thousands and millions of kalpas. We now can see it, hear it, accept and hold it. May we realize the true mind of the Tathagata. Today is the second day of this 7-day sesshin in March 2023 at Mountain Gate in northern New Mexico. And I'd like to share with you today some comments about Torei Enji's Bodhisattva vow, which we chant every morning during sesshin. It's a beautiful, exquisitely teaching chant about the higher order of behavior in this world, what we can begin to unfold through our Zen practice. As we continue our Zen practice, we naturally begin to let go of stuff. Stuff? Well, things like ideas about ourselves, things like what we need to have to be happy, old habit patterns we begin to see more clearly and have the option there to let them go as part of that process. And gradually we become more and more closely attuned to our true self. We're not trying to get anything. Moreover, we're really trying to let go of things that impede our ability to live from our true nature, fully, completely, fulfilling, and free. So let's get started. Torei Enji's Bodhisattva vow. He starts addressing his students, and he says, "Disciples, when I humbly observe the true nature of things, all are the marvelous manifestations of the Tathagata's truth." Now, the Tathagata is the name that the Buddha called himself. It's not a name. It represents a truth, a deep, profound truth of letting go so completely that our true nature shines through and is able to function. And that is our goal in Zen practice. So Torei, who was deeply enlightened and a student of Hakuin Zenji in Japan in the 1800s, 1700s, and 1800s, came to Hakuin already with having had one Kensho experience. He ordained very early on, and when he was 19, 20, 21 years old, he arrived at Hakuin's temple. And Hakuin took him on as a student and eventually made him his successor. And the fact that he had done basically already 20 years of hardcore Zen practice before he was made a successor at the age of 27 says a lot about what we can reach through our Zen practice. Not that we want to become a Zen teacher's successor, but that we want to become free. Free and open to that innate sense, the realization of that innate sense that there is something really important that we're just barely out of touch with in this life. And this is the sense that often brings people to Zen practice or to spiritual practice in general. Torei Enji, as you know, became quite ill when he was 26 years old. He had been striving. He would be at Hakuin's place for extensive periods of time, and then he would go off and do solo retreats. This is a classic way of practice, and it is still extant. I've done them myself. People at Sogenji have done them. There are a couple of places at Sogenji where you can do a solo retreat with the Roshi's permission. You don't just stay up there and hang out at either the retreat place. That's a little hut up in the mountains, kind of hidden away in the brush, or the pagoda. Those are the two places you can be in retreat. Pagoda is fenced in, although it's right next to one of the paths leading up to the top of the mountain that Sogenji sits below, and so periodically there are people that will be passing by. And there's no real place to do much of anything except because a pagoda is just, there's a very small ground floor and it's wooden. And so you have to haul a mat up there. By mat, I mean a futon really, so that you can roll it out and sleep on it. And you do zazen on your own schedule, which is intended to be intense. You're away from the distractions of being in the temple, and so you can sit 24/7 if you want to. Food, you come down to the kitchen every morning early before breakfast and do sanzen with a roshi at the end of the normal sanzen queue, and then you go by the kitchen and pick up a thermos of whatever, tea, hot water, and something to eat. You take it all back up, and that's your food for the day. You come back down in the evening and bring the containers, have sanzen again, and then go back up. And it can range from just a few days to a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, or more, depending on the Roshi's approval. And any number of people have done it. So it's a way of really deepening your practice in a different environment. This is also offered to a certain limited degree with yaza, because yaza is outside the formal sitting periods, and so you can sit pretty much anywhere in the zendo except at the top 2 seats. Although if you're a jikijutsu, you can sit in the top seat if you want to, because that's your seat. You don't have to sit in your formal seat in the zendo. You can also sit in a chair in the hallway. You can sit in chairs outside. You can take a mat out of the cushion storage cabinet and a cushion and sit on a mat and cushion outside. Of course, this time of year, it's a little chilly. And also, because of our wonderful mascot, Boo, who keeps us protected at night by going around on his nightly rounds to keep the bears and the mountain lions away. He'll come up and want to interact with you. So that can be a little challenging. Nonetheless, people have gone and sat. We have a number of decks that you can sit on, including an upper deck where you won't have to contend with Boo. But at any rate, it's an opportunity. When we change up our program of sitting, not the practice itself, but the environment and the timing and so on and so forth, it can be refreshing and balancing and supportive of the regular in the zendo formal sitting. To support that idea, in the Rochester Zen Center, when I was training there, and I have no idea what it's like now. I left in 1991, and that's a long time ago. And when it was at that time, the sittings, the zendo, the sesshin were all identical. For over many, many years, close to 50 years of training there, a form has developed, and that was respected, and that's how we did the practice then. However, at one point back in the 80s, Roshi Kapleau gave several sesshin out in New Mexico at a place up in the mountains across the river from Mountain Gate. Across the river really means about 80 miles or 100 miles. On the other side of the mountains, and nothing was the same. Not only was nothing the same, but everything kept changing. All day long, things kept changing. And all of a sudden, people began to get kensho experiences. These are people who've been working at it for many, 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 many years, 10, 15, 20 years. And suddenly they're breaking through because there was no possibility of doing what Roshi called business as usual. And so we were bumped out of our ruts and had to work with that. Right now, in this era, There's so much going on that is bumping everybody out of any complacency, any business as usual. There are extreme weather conditions. Yesterday, I saw a notice that the Weather Bureau had issued extreme warnings, extreme flood warnings for Georgia, Alabama, including Atlanta. And they were so high a warning that it was highly, people were told, really, you have to be careful because the flooding danger is so great that you could be washed away, even if you've never had a flood before in your life, in your street. It was impacting Atlanta, which is a major metropolis there, and a lot of other things. There were furious tornadoes in Mississippi and Alabama recently, wiping out entire towns. The East Coast is expecting flooding again. At the same time, the weather patterns are going up and down and all around. We've been getting much more precipitation now because California is flooded, and in an atmospheric river, which is producing much more flooding. In fact, today the news was that the Central Valley, which is a very important agricultural area for the whole United States, is so severely flooded that the reservoirs, the levees, everything is overflowing. There's no other place to put the water. And it's a valley, so Noah, get out your boat. Lots of stuff is going on. I just recently learned from one of our students that within 30 days, the company he's working for may no longer exist because they've got a project that if they get the backing, they'll be able to continue. But if they don't, that's the end. Many people are experiencing these kinds of things. It is wild. And we're experiencing not only environmental things, but additional events in our life. And recently, we had someone interested in coming to practice here, and his motivation is, part of his motivation, I should say, is that 2 family members have died very recently. And this is a young man, and he may not be talking about his grandparents. So, to do the practice, to dive deeply into this search for who we really are, has never been more vital. The times in history when Buddhism really thrived, when the great teachers arose like Joshu, Nansen, and so on, were all times of great trouble. Many were caught in pogroms in China. There were many times in China where there were vast attacks on Buddhists. And it just, when things get really difficult, untenably difficult, we are forced to look in another direction. And that is a benefit. As painful as these environments can be, these situations can be, we have a greater opportunity for coming to awakening because we can't just do our usual stuff. So there's a positive benefit to all this chaos in the world, one of which was that Putin, as you may or may not know, has threatened to arm an adjacent country to Ukraine with nuclear weapons. So he's ready to blow up the world so that he can prevail. What happens if that happens? At any rate, let's continue with Torei Enji's Bodhisattva vow. When I humbly observe the true nature of things, all are the marvelous manifestation of the Tathagata's truth. Atom by atom, instant by instant, all are none other than this mysterious radiance. What is this mysterious radiance? Tibetan teachers speak of this mysterious radiance as an expression of our true nature. Nothing held on to, simply nobody being there, but this radiant energy filled with potential, with compassion, with wisdom. This is who we really are. My watch keeps telling me it needs to stop the workout I was doing a while ago. Because of this, our virtuous ancestors extended loving care and reverence towards even such beings as birds and beasts. Of course, we have this big fluffy puppy dog here, and it's hard not to love him. He's so friendly and so sweet. And even if we were to meet a bear, do we have an idea what one of our local bears is going to do or is? Or can we open our minds to experience that animal simply as another expression of the beingness of the universe? We all have our ideas about people too. I don't like this person, they did this to me, or I just don't like that person, period. Or any number of other opinions about people and things. Torei continues on about that as well. How then can we be but humbly grateful for the food, drink, and clothing that nourishes and protects us throughout the day, these being, in essence, the warm skin and flesh of the great masters, the incarnate compassion of the Buddha. If it is so, even with inanimate objects, or animate ones that are on four legs or whatever, or swim or fly, how much more should we be kind and merciful towards human beings, even those who are foolish? Though they become our sworn enemies, reviling and persecuting us, this is a hard one for most people. They're actually for pretty much everyone. Though they become our sworn enemies, reviling and persecuting us, we should regard them as Bodhisattva manifestations who, in their great compassion, are employing skillful means to help emancipate us from the karma we have produced through our biased, self-centered views. We can reach a place in our practice where it's not a whitewash, but right in the middle of a very challenging interaction with someone, we can allow ourselves to be open, honoring, embracing, even in the midst of a fierce storm of anger. It actually transforms people when we do that. And you know the usual stories. I won't go into them now. There are many examples of this. You can read Peace Pilgrim. The books about Peace Pilgrim are free to anyone who requests them. She was a true bodhisattva, and there were many occurrences in her life where she expressed exactly this. And people were transformed as a result. This goes to show that as the sixth ancestor in Zen, the Chinese ancestor in Zen, Huineng, said famously, "When others are at fault, I too am at fault. When I am at fault, I alone am at fault." Our interactions, our energetic interactions with other beings, whether they're human or otherwise, creates an interactive energy. And how our energy reaches those beings either produces a positive or a negative or neutral effect. We really are party to our own negative interactions. It's a hard thing to swallow because we're so used to saying, oh, that person did this to me, therefore. But it's not 100% true. be careful about labeling people or things. If we awaken in ourselves this deep truth, this deep pure faith, offering humble words and taking sincere refuge in our true nature, then with every thought there will bloom a lotus flower, each with a Buddha. And of course that's a metaphor. When we allow ourselves to be human and be humble, then in our interactions, metaphorically, a Buddha comes forth. Not that we are being the Buddha, but that the voice of the Buddha, the energy of the Buddha is expressed through that humility, through that let-go-ness. And with the result that our interactions are very, very different. It creates a kind of a Buddha realm where we can, in our own humility, our own let-go-ness, and it has to be genuine, that impacts, influences, inspires, subconsciously even informs people we're interacting with, or animals, or whatever we're interacting with. And the interactions are very different from what they would be if we came about less humble, less let go. We've all had challenging experiences in our life, and they have formed us through conditioning into a particular persona. But that persona is flexible, it's malleable, it's not fixed, and it's not real. We can, through deep practice, begin to see through where we are caught, and in acknowledging that, in owning it, we are offered the opportunity to work with it, to let it go. It is so much easier to let it go when we do that. And gradually we transform without even realizing it. And in our transformation, our relationships also become transformed. Very different. It can also go the opposite way. If we become bitter through experiences, then that bitterness sort of surrounds us with a kind of an energy that people react to. And so our interactions with people are very different. We have a great deal of responsibility in this. This is what Torei Enji is also pointing out. We have a choice, too, to carry on in what can feel very comfortable, to sit on our anger and just feel it and not work with it, not feel the felt sense, but keep the story going about the anger and spit it out and impact our environment. So we've seen many instances of this. I saw it in my own family. It's an interesting phenomenon. The people who are able to reach a more enlightened state of mind, still karmic influence, which is their behavior, can bring them back down into a negative situation, negative mind state, negative experiences. And so people who are born into a higher realm of existence can find themselves into a lower realm of existence with the next birth. It all depends on their behavior, our behavior in this life. And we here in the Zendo, I'm pretty sure, are committed to opening, deeply freeing ourselves so that others may also become free. This is another aspect of that Bodhisattva vow, to liberate all sentient beings. The sentient beings in our own mind are the places where we're caught. The sentient beings, when we let go those caught places, when we see through them and let them go and become more free of those things, then it influences everyone around us. It is quite phenomenal. I had an experience with this with Roshi Kapleau very early on. I had been in a situation that caused me extreme pain, and it was particularly extreme because I had had that very kind of pain for the very same kinds of reasons since I was born. And Roshi Kapleau came back from one of his times out in Mexico, walked into the office where I was working, and said, they told me you'd lost a lot of weight. And I burst into tears. And then I said, can I come talk to you? And he said, yes. So we set an appointment time. And at that time, I went to his quarters, sat on his sofa. He was also sitting on his sofa. He had this funny sofa built particularly for him so he could sit in full lotus on it. And I sat down, and all of a sudden, there was no problem. All the pain and anguish simply disappeared. And all I could say was, well, I guess I know it's going to be all right. And that was the end of the interview. And it was a long haul, but that encounter where basically in hindsight, I know it was because the Roshi was so let go and so free that his mind state was expressed to me in a very palpable way. Then the other story with regard to the Rochester Zen Center also is the art teacher from Buffalo who used to come every opportunity to sit in the Rochester Zen Center. Because he was teacher, he had the opportunity also to go to many sesshin, and he did. He was quite dedicated. And at one point, he'd been practicing on the koan move for 13 years, and he was getting quite frustrated. And so he went into Dokuzan, as it's called there, and said to Roshi, I've been working on move for 13 years. And Roshi said, 13 years, 30 years. And John told me suddenly it no longer mattered. And he continued training for another 7 years. So 20 years in all of very hardcore training. And he did have a significantly deep Kensho experience. So another encounter with someone who was so let go that their mind state was able to fill the room, in essence, and take away any anxiety, any concern, any frustration of the person he was talking to. The third story is about Mario Montesa, a Swiss-Italian man who I met at Sogenji, who had been stabbed in the heart when he was in his 20s, I think it was. And he was found soon enough to be hospitalized. During the 6 weeks he was totally unconscious in the hospital. He also had a stroke or two. And the doctors told him he was clinically dead for 6 to 8 minutes. He gradually was able, although when he woke up, he was completely paralyzed, blind, and mute. All he could do was hear, which is interesting because it's always said that the last sense that goes as we are dying is hearing, which is why when the memorial services are held for people who've just died, chanting is so important, particularly the Heart Sutra, because it is the heart of perfect wisdom. It's the expression of the deepest teaching of the Buddha, and it is a deep teaching. And so it can reach the hearing of the person who's dead, whether or not they're still in their body. At any rate, Mario, through his experience, had let go so profoundly. And it was such a challenge for him to continue to heal. Eventually, he was able to walk, talk. His blindness left after quite some time. He was in the hospital a long time. When I met him, he was able to walk and talk, and in fact, he gave a talk about his experiences to the Sangha at Sogenji when I was there. I was actually guest housekeeper, and so he actually stayed in the guest house with his girlfriend, who is still with him. I think they're probably married at this point, and a male. I don't know whether he was a student, friend, or what he was, but they had just come from India, and the other person was there to help if he needed help. And the one expression of his nerve damage that I could see is he had what is called Parkinsonism, which is not Parkinson's, but it is with that condition, you manifest as if you had Parkinson's. And in fact, he had a drop attack when I was showing him a Shinto shrine nearby. He just dropped to the ground as if somebody pulled the plug. And everybody stood there, which is what he expected and wanted. And he got himself back up rather quickly. So Mario, by the time I met him, was so incredibly let go that when you closed your eyes to tune in to his energy, there was nobody there. He was profoundly let go. And what he said in general, and he says this even now, is, I take people's questions away. That's an interesting way of putting it, but it's the same thing that happened with me in Roshi Kepler's presence, and John with Kepler-roshi's presence, and many, many people with Mario's presence. I experienced that myself as well, and many, many people have done that. He now teaches, and has for a long time, in Europe. And he trained in India. I believe it was at Ramana Maharshi's ashram. Ramana Maharshi, if you remember, was the young Indian boy, he was 14 years old at the time, who had a sudden fear of death. And instead of trying to rationalize it or shove it down, he actually lay down on the floor and felt like what it would be, not to be able to breathe anymore, not become stiff, his body becomes stiff. He could see himself being carried to the burning grounds. And what happened was a profound awakening experience. And he left then and became a deeply humble, deeply realized spiritual teacher in India. And his ashram is still going. And in fact, our good friends Kyo-san and Ko-san are there right now. So the last part of this, if we awaken in ourselves, it's this deep, pure faith, offering humble words and taking sincere refuge in our true nature. Then with every thought, there will be bloom a lotus flower, each with a Buddha. These Buddhas will establish pure lands everywhere. That energy, whatever you want to call it, realm around, and reveal the radiance of the Tathagata beneath our very feet. May we extend this mind throughout the universe so that we and all sentient beings may equally bring to fruition the seeds of wisdom. It doesn't come easily, but it comes if we persist. And as Roshi Kapleau used to say, our lives depend upon it. When he was first saying that, I thought, oh, yes, sure. But really, the quality of our lives, our experiences in life, do depend on it. The more deeply we practice, the more sincerely we practice, the more we are willing to ride out the rough periods in our practice, and there will be rough periods, the more we are willing to work on this ourselves as places to work on ourselves are revealed. And again, we can't make ourselves do something. If we experience at a deep level, and it has a particular quality to it, a recognition of where we are behaving in a particular way that is not highly appropriate, or which is fueled by anger, or fueled by a lack of compassion, or fueled by greed. If we go into that physical sensation in our body, then we are able to little by little become free of it. And it's easy. The hard part is getting to the point where we realize it, because we have a deep investment in being somebody that doesn't do those things. So we have work to do, but we have this amazing path on which to walk, with teachers that can guide us in it, senior students that can help us as well. The whole Sangha can help. We're a family, a small family here, but we're a family, and a very caring, compassionate family. So keep working, keep going. Don't let anything stop you, because the result of your deep practice will be unbelievably liberating. And you can do it. Thank you for listening. We'll stop now and recite the 4 vows.